Before we get into it, if you're a comic book fan just looking for a place to happily exist in comics fandom without all the dreck that professionals in and around the comic book industry do to weigh it down, I can, with my whole chest, suggest Casually Comics and Dope Spill Comics on YouTube. All of the comics awesomeness and never any of the politics. With that disclaimer out of the way, as you can probably gather from my previous video, I have a general disdain for the supposed culture war and all its various players, from the culture vultures to the propagandists, the grifters, and inevitably the cancel pigs. And as such, I have a complicated relationship with a fixture in this arena called Comicsgate. The TLDR on Comicsgate is that around 2015 to 2016, during what led up to the election of Trump and his administration, critics and professionals in the comic book world who criticized primarily the writers and editors at Marvel and DC Comics for their behavior on Twitter towards conservatives and liberals, as well as a lot of the heavy-handed, real-world progressive politics being ham-fisted into the actual comics, saw a divide occur within fandom. X-Men readers, along with every other fandom from Star Wars to Superman fans, were called racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobes if they did something as little as watch a YouTube channel or follow a conservative comic book professional on Twitter or Instagram. And as that hit a fever pitch and conservative authors and illustrators were being kicked out of the mainstream industry for their political opinions, socio-political opinions, Disney was firing people, lawsuits abound, books were being burned, milkshakes were drunk. It was a veritable shit show, and a lot of lives were ruined. If you want a kind of boots on the ground, detailed recounting of all that occurred within the industry during that time, the channel Comics Matter with ya boy Zach, formerly Diversity in Comics, has thousands of videos that date back to that fateful time from one of its contextually provocateurs. I'm extremely happy to tell you that the conservative, indeed some liberal illustrators and authors who were ostracized in mainstream comics for their beliefs managed to find a healthy, vibrant niche in independent comics, and in doing so actually revolutionized crowdfunding in comics. They've shattered every single comics crowdfunding record that ever was, and likely their achievements will never be surpassed. No matter how occasionally abysmal or intellectually or even morally indefensible some of the individual politics within Comicsgate may sometimes be, depending, of course, on your own socio-political positions, they have managed to effectively build their own industry. And unlike the mainstream, it is indeed open to persons of every single color, creed, ethnicity, sexuality, political, or religious position. I cannot express as an artist how proud I am of these creators and how thankful I am to all the Marvel and DC readers who saw fit to support them in their endeavors. Some of those readers obviously agreed with a lot of the conservative and liberal positions of these creators, but a lot of them did not. What they agreed with was that a mainstream comic book industry that ousts artists and craftsmen for their espoused beliefs or even untoward but legal actions is not an industry that's worth preserving, and in fact an industry that should be aggressively and directly critiqued until these practices are no longer in practice. And I use the word industry, and I kind of hate it. It's like when people talk about the government or the system. These entities are not conscious. They are comprised of individuals operating as they see fit. When we say someone is being oppressed, for instance, there's not a structure or circumstance that can do that without individuals intentionally manning and operating these structures and circumstances. Which, I guess, brings us to the reason we're here. Veteran comic book artist Ed Piskor took his life because individuals in the comic book industry and their individual followers took everything from him they had capacity to take. And unlike the creators in Comicsgate, who had somewhere to turn when it all collapsed around him, when his gallery shows were canceled, his book deals were canceled, his YouTube show was canceled, his so-called friends all publicly abandoned him, reporters banging on his door, and those individuals within the comic book industry took to social media to utterly destroy this man's life, which now appear to be perhaps baseless accusations made by one of Ed's peers looking for some social media clout, a man whose entire life was about celebrating and creating comics and the friendships he once had in this industry. All Ed had left after this was perhaps a thought that a cup of coffee the next day might still taste good. There was still air for him to freely breathe into his tightened chest. Right? Something, a sunrise is beautiful. Never mind the news plastering your home address on the screen while they call you a sexual predator. Ed names in his last letter the incomplete list of individuals who did everything they could to get him to take his life. They succeeded because Ed had nowhere left to go. While Comicsgate didn't go nearly as hard on Ed as his progressive peers did, in life Ed was decisively anti-Comicsgate, as one must necessarily be if they want to work in or with mainstream comics. And as such, when the cancel pigs came for him, there wasn't too much pity bestowed on someone who never took issue with it happening to them, to Comicsgaters, right? I'd like to believe that Comicsgate would have accepted him in, based on what I've heard from the main actors there. They likely would have, indeed, had he reached out, but make no mistake, affiliation with Comicsgate is to tarnish your legacy and the legacy of your works under the guise of a progressive news media and lens. Perhaps some future histories will view Comicsgate and their works differently, but that does little for the actual human beings impacted in the now. Despite Ed disliking and making sure to distance himself from Comicsgate, I think if Ed were here, he would tell you that famous Michael Jordan line, "Conservatives buy shoes too." I don't think Ed or anyone in Comicsgate, or hopefully anywhere in the arts, is making works for a specific audience. That's not what craftsmen, and certainly not what artists, do. Every story is for every person. All art is for all people. Comics are for everyone. So what do we do with all this? Is Ed's death going to curb the insatiable appetite of the cancel pigs, persons in a perpetually manic and depressed state who are desperate and frothing for their next hit of righteous cancellation, their next scalp? Are we going to become a social media society wherein if someone does not break the law, they will not be publicly destroyed? Because Ed, even in perhaps false allegation, didn't break any law. And if our laws are immoral, why do we have them? What is the point of a law if it's an immoral law? If someone doesn't break the law, should their life and livelihood be destroyed? Should their friends and peers abandon them? But perhaps most important of all, and I know this might be difficult to fully grasp without a deep and esoteric dive, but most importantly, should we not separate art from artist? Comicsgate is wonderful for what it's given to humanity, a place where our artists and authors and illustrators and creators who've been chucked into the ocean of blood to drown and die can find some respite to not only survive, but to thrive. But can't we do better than building ideological, sociopolitical ships? Can't we drain the ocean? Ed Piskor didn't die because of cancel pigs. He didn't die because of clout chasers. He didn't die because his pseudo friends abandoned him. He died because when he was dropped into that ocean, he saw no land nor ship to swim to. But the reason he had to swim is because we have forgotten our duty, our responsibility to what it means to be human. We are sacks of meat and bone, fixed to a rock floating in endless space, what makes us more than what we are is that which we glean from the ethereal. Love, purpose, inspiration. Art is the manifestation of an ethereal truth that is observed by the artist and plucked from that ethereal, which they then exhibit for us in our reality. Ed Piskor died because we failed at one of our most principal duties as a collective, as humans, to always separate art from artist, truth from speaker. If we separated art from artist, Ed's publishing deal remains. If we separated art from artist, his gallery show goes on as planned. His family, his true friends, his livelihood, and indeed his art would remain unaffected. And that would have been more than the memory of the potential taste of tomorrow's morning cup of coffee. That would have been enough to keep a great artist alive another day. We are silencing and murdering our artists, and in doing so, we are removing their now and potential art and stories from this world. We are becoming less than human, and we will not survive it. Because pointless sacks of meat and bone on a purposeless floating rock in an endless space devoid of love is all that's left when our observation of the ethereal is severed. A severing of love, purpose, and inspiration. We are manufacturing the perfect reflection of hell. Ed Piskor died because we failed him. Because we failed ourselves. We failed at being human. We failed to separate art from artist. When engaged in the action of art, the artist is as no one. The artist is the burdened sieve of our ethereal truths made manifest in our world. We have severed one of our finite number of observers who are burdened and indeed willing to dedicate their lives to manifesting these truths that belong to each of us, and for all those yet born. In our corrupt and righteous hubris, we have done it. We killed Ed Piskor because we did not separate art from artist. He was sacrificed at the altar of our wretched collective ignorance. Our children will not need to sin and die to meet hell. We are designing it for them. With every artist's voice we silence, every artist's work we burn and condemn, and every artist's life we take. But always remember, evil people do not exist. Only evil ideologies exist. The ocean of blood is there because we choose to fill the basin. You are not the ideology you have been indoctrinated to submit to. Your ideology belongs to you. You can choose to drain the ocean and to once again let every artist stand on dry land so that we might stare in awe at their actualizations of all that we knew to be true but did not in our words and efforts have the capacity to make real these totems of our ethereal truths.
Whenever I have dreams where I'm at home, it's always here. I always wake up in my bedroom here still, and I haven't been here for like 19 or 20 years. It was something that I excelled at in the environment that I was raised. So I wasn't that good at sports or any of that kind of stuff, but everybody kind of responded to my comic book thing. Fun to watch happen sort of before my eyes. I'm sitting here and I'm drawing stuff, and I'm not impressing myself, but the work's getting better. There were always holes in the walls too, here and there. And whenever I draw interiors of apartments and stuff, I draw holes in the walls. And my dad is like, "Why do you always gotta put holes in the walls?" But with that does come a lack of satisfaction constantly. So that's like the one downer where it's just like I don't know if many cartoonists could be like truly happy no matter what, just because it's like it's not. Every page you have an opportunity to create the best comic page ever, and you fail every time. But you're doing all right. You know, you're progressing, you're learning. There's a yin and yang to it.